Good morning, Bucknutters. Welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, September 24th, 2018. I am Dave Biddle. Very happy to be joined by Steve Helwagen. Steve, let's start with Ohio State starting linebackers. Against Tulane, I don't think I've ever seen this before, but the starting linebackers, none of them had a tackle. Like Tuf Borland, Malik Harrison, Pete Werner. And I know they only played at like one half of football, but I still don't think I've ever seen that before in my life, Steve.
Well, it is interesting. I think that I guess what I would say is the guys up front did a pretty good job of not allowing Tulane to get beyond the first level. There weren't a lot of big gash plays. Now, they did drive for a touchdown once the game was 28-0, but my guess is, as I think back on it, Ohio State probably had a lot of the backups in at that point as well. So I know that there was a pass interference penalty, and they gave up a deep pass. I think it was Arnett was in coverage on that deep pass that got through, and Okuda had a pass interference penalty. So, yeah, it was just, I don't know, probably an anomaly as much as anything. But is it troubling? It could be. Penn State last week had 387 yards rushing against Illinois. Miles Sanders, the guy who's replaced Saquon Barkley, he ran 22 times for 200 yards. So the linebackers are going to need to come to play this week, I can tell you that, or it could be a very long night. But, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about this linebacker group, and some of it is scheme-related. The defensive line is not being asked to occupy blockers as much as perhaps they had been in the past. They've been sent out there to make plays, and they're making a good number of plays, but it kind of leaves your linebackers naked, for lack of a better term. And I don't know. I just think that I guess I need to go back over that game. I think there was some talk that Borland had some opportunities and missed on some tackles that he probably could have made. I don't recall really seeing or hearing an instance where Werner or Harrison were really in position to make a play, as far as I recall. But I don't know. I guess I'd have to go back over it.
Yeah, it was a rough game from Borland. I don't know if I agree with you. I don't know if the other two really had a bad game. I did go back and watch the game, and yeah, Borland missed. There was clearly two plays, but we're talking about two plays against Tulane. I'm not going to write off Tuf Borland. He looked pretty good last year as a redshirt freshman, and I'm certain he's still knocking off some rust from that injury. It's almost amazing he was even able to play this early in the season, or at all this season if it was a ruptured Achilles, which we still haven't got final word on that. All right, on a positive note. I mean, Dwayne Haskins is so good, it's unbelievable. I mean, is he the best Ohio State quarterback in recent memory? You can even throw Art Schlichter. I don't even know if that's recent memory. Let's just throw guys in there that during our lifetimes. I mean, is he the best Ohio State quarterback of our lifetime? And I don't think that's hyperbole.
No, it's 4 games plus part of that Michigan game last year is the sample size that you really look at. I think the test for Dwayne Haskins is going to be is he going to do it? Yeah, is he going to do it in the big game? Is he going to put them in position to win a Big Ten championship? And I think that's he's got all the raw physical ability. I was watching Wall-to-Wall Sports last night on Channel 10 with Tim May, and he said he's got the artistry of the quarterback position down, which was a good way to put it. I mean, he attacks defenses with an array of throws that is heretofore unseen, I guess, is what I would say. Art Schlichter played in a day and time that football was much different, certainly. Joe Germain was really good. Troy Smith was really good. And Cardale Jones could wing it. So those are probably the standards that I think of. Bobby Hoying obviously was pretty good. I don't know. I think he's up there. I think he's in the discussion, top 3, top 4, but it's only been 4.5 games. I think we need to see him do this over the course of an entire season. He's off to a great start, but let's tap the brake just a little bit. Oregon State, Rutgers, and Tulane aren't going to beat anybody. He played very well against TCU, so that's probably the one that you can hang your hat on right now, and he did pretty well in that game. So, yeah, I think it's looking good that he's going to be up there. But again, I think the comment I always make is the Tuesday walkthrough with the garbage cans as defensive end is, probably as much or more pushback that he's seen so far. So I think I want to see it. I mean, they threw passes, Dave, to 14 different receivers on Saturday. That's not something I can ever recall anywhere. 14 different people.
And he's so accurate. It's amazing. Yeah. You're right. And he can do it all. He doesn't just throw the fastball. When he throws an intermediate or a short route, really, he can almost bring it down to almost like a sidearm and just kind of take some off the ball. He can take some velocity off of it. It's the way he leads his receivers. He can just, and I think you said it well. I'm not ready to say he's the best Ohio State quarterback ever because I need to see more. What I've seen so far, he looks like the best. But before I'm ready to anoint him as the best, I do need to see more than 4 starts. I really give him credit for that Michigan game, even though it wasn't a start. That's still, the TCU game, the way he played when, they were throwing everything at him and the pressure was on. But, games like Penn State, obviously Michigan later this year, Michigan State, hopefully the postseason after that. That'll be the true test. But the best, my benchmark right now for the best that I've seen since I've been, watching Ohio State football, which goes back to really Mike Tomczak was the first one that I watched real carefully. But I remember bits and pieces of Schleister, and I've watched him on film, so I know all about Art Schleister. But my benchmark for best Ohio State quarterback in my lifetime is Troy Smith, and much bigger sample size. But what I'm seeing out of Haskins is it trumps even what Troy Smith was to me. But again, I do need to see more. I know you wanted to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say 2 things. The one thing about Art Schleister that I remember, there was a game they played Illinois. Dave Wilson, I think, for Illinois threw for 500 yards, and Ohio State still won the game like 49-42, something like that. And I was just a kid, but what was interesting was the following week I was going to a wrestling show at the convention center in Columbus, and Art Schleister was on the escalator going to the game. And my dad happened to be with me, and they started talking about the game, and I was like, holy cow. And my dad said something to the effect of, man, you really played a great game, and he said Dave Wilson did too. I wonder if we are in for this week, not to jump too far ahead, some kind of shootout like that with, Ohio State is number 2 in scoring 54.5 points. Penn State's number 1, 55.5 points. I mean, you've got the 2 highest scoring teams in the country that are going out there this week to play one another. And, man, the first 1 to 50 might win this game. I don't know. We went to a Big 10 game and a Big 12 game broke out. I don't know what we might see on Saturday. That was one thing. Another thing I wanted to say was J.T. Barrett set the record, 16 straight completions last year against Penn State, and that streak was snapped when he threw that pick 6 the very first play against Iowa the following game. Well, Haskins got all the way up to 15 in a row before he threw an incompletion the other day, and Martell entered the game at 13 in a row. He threw 1 completion and then had an incompletion, and he's at 14. So now the top 3 on that list are Barrett 16, Haskins 15, and Martell 14. That's pretty remarkable stuff in the history of Ohio State football that you've got that type of accuracy working for your 2 current quarterbacks.
We touched on it a little bit. Obviously, a huge game this Saturday. Every time they play Penn State, it's at night. It's a whiteout. Penn State looks at Ohio State as their main rival. We all know that. Buckeyes are favored by 4. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Buckeye, hopefully there'll be no urine bags thrown on the. Or I don't think Ohio State's band is ever going to go there. But if Ohio State's band does go, which they're not, then hopefully the Penn State students don't throw urine bags on them.
I'm a little concerned, Dave. My kids are going to be on a bus from Block O going to the game. I'm like,
oh God, tell them to wear body armor. Jeez. Are we allowed in here with body armor on? Just we don't want to get urine thrown on us and other things.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned.
Buckeyes favored by 4.5 points, Steve, as of this morning, per our good friends over at Bovada. 4.5 points. That sounds about right to me. What are your thoughts on this game?
Well, I think before the season you would have thought Ohio State would be a pretty solid 6 or 7 point favorite. Penn State, they opened the season. They had to go to overtime to beat Appalachian State from the Sun Belt Conference. Their defense gave up 38 points in that game. They came back the following week, went to Pittsburgh, and basically slammed the car door on Pittsburgh's head. It was 51-6, and really laid Pittsburgh out to bear. I mean, it was bad. Then of course they womped up on Kent State, and this past week they were in a dogfight at Illinois. They were behind 24-21 in the third quarter, and came out and scored 42 unanswered points to end the game, and just completely shot on Illinois. I mean, it was really breathtaking to watch what they did. So they kind of play in fits and spurts. I mean, they're not a consistent football team. You just have to kind of put that out there. The fourth quarter against Appalachian State were okay, and the first 2 quarters against Illinois were okay, but otherwise they played lights out. I mean, so you just don't know what Penn State team you're going to get. They're going to be keyed up. I mean, obviously you know that. It's a whiteout, and it's Ohio State, and the stakes are so high. This was something interesting. I made a point in the first look column yesterday that Ohio State went there 2 years ago and got beat, lost on a blocked field goal and a blocked punt, 24-21. They lost the game, and they still got into the playoff. And that was because they had gone down to Oklahoma and won earlier in the season, and Oklahoma went on and won the Big 12. And I made that comment, well, they've already beaten TCU, but of course now TCU's taking on Waters, probably not going to win the Big 12 now that they've lost to Texas and still have, so many more games to play in that conference. Some of the luster has come off of that win, and that's not your trump card to get you in the playoff anymore. So this really does become a must-win game on September the 29th. Hard to believe, but we're already at that point. And the question comes down is which team's ready to win it. I think that's the big question. I think neither team has really had a vintage defensive performance or at least performed at the level that their defenses have in years past. Both of them had to add 7 or 8 new starters on defense, and there have been some issues. So as I get back to what I was saying earlier, I mean, is 45-40 going to be the final score of this game? I think that's entirely possible. So I guess we'll get there and see what the conditions are. I think my early look was it's going to be a nice day, but again, maybe whoever has the ball last is the one that wins this game. But I just think Haskins is such a weapon, and he's got all these receivers, and it may come down to whether they can establish J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber running the football. That may come down to be the deciding factor.
Yeah, I like the Buckeyes by a touchdown in this game. We'll see how it goes, but I think hopefully the weather does hold off. I think keeping it a relatively fast track that only helps Ohio State. All right, a few more things. There's so much to talk about, so much important stuff to talk about. By the way, we will, as usual, interview Urban Meyer today around 11:45 a.m., 11:45 a.m. Eastern, so keep it locked to Bucknuts for that. But a few more things to get to here. On the 5-ish, Mike Weber is banged up. I guess we'll find out more today from Urban. I don't know if he'll have anything definitive, but just from what you're seeing, do you think do you expect to see him play against the Nittany Lions? I tend to think if there was any other game he might not play, I tend to think this is one of those weeks where they're just going to put duct tape on him, whatever it takes, get him out there. And, they don't need to lean on him the whole game because they have Dobbins and they have some other guys. I do think Weber's going to play this week if I had to guess, but that's just a wild guess. What's your take, Steve?
Yeah, I think he's definitely going to try and make it a go. Urban said after the game it was a minor foot strain and probably held out of the game as a precaution from that point on. It looked like a tackler rolled up on him on the sideline. It appeared somebody, as he was going out of bounds, he caught a short pass and went out of bounds, and looked like somebody ended up, rolling over on his foot or ankle. And, it sounds to me like it was just a precaution. I'm sure he'll be getting and has been getting treatment on it, and they probably will hold him out a day or two of practice just to help with that healing and do the right things in terms of rehab, the proper exercises and flexibility, and everything that he needs to get that thing back where it needs to be so he can help the bottom line on Saturday. He doesn't want to miss that game. And, he at times has been the best Mike Weber we've ever seen. And, he and Dobbins are a pretty effective 1-2 punch. And, I think they're excited to get into a 4-quarter game where both of them can get 15 or 20 carries. That would be kind of an exciting thing, I think, for them. And the plays will be there if he's healthy. So if he can't go, I assume Master Teague would be the next guy up. Brian Snead, it appeared, did not suit up for the game on Saturday after missing the trip to TCU, and perhaps that's a question that Coach Meyer will be asked this week. Was this a 2-game suspension? Where does he stand? Is he being allowed to return to the field? We know he practiced last week, I guess, so I don't know. I guess we'll see where that's at. But, again, now that's part of the equation as well because they may need all 4 of those backs to win this game. So, you never know. But I would say that Weber's going to give it a go.
Yeah, the Snead question is certainly one that I have in my holster ready to ask Urban today if I get the opportunity early. I'm sure someone's going to ask about it. So if I get an opportunity early, I'm going to ask about Snead and see what he can say about that. It might be too delicate where you can't share too much. We'll find out. A couple more things we'll get you out of here, Mr. Helwagen. I got to admit, the Zach Smith stuff and everything that's been going on, I've tuned that out for the last week at least, after that being dominant for the last 2 months. Apparently there's more Zach Smith news. What can you share with the masses on that front?
Yeah, Ohio State put out last week, I had a Freedom of Information Act request with them for how his termination was put, and basically this is kind of an extraordinary situation. Urban Meyer fired him, it sounds like, over the telephone from Chicago on the day before the Big Ten Media Days, and it was left unsaid whether it was for cause or not. So his attorney emailed Julie Venata, the attorney for the athletic department, who is their legal counsel on staff, and she got back to his attorney and said, well, there'd never been a formally signed contract. He had a term sheet, basically, that he and Gene Smith had signed off on back in February, and with the idea that at some point he would be given a formal contract. They said in lieu of a formal contract and just a term sheet, they don't owe him anything. It had never been addressed. What would happen in the event of a termination? It's not in the term sheet. All that's there is what he was expected to get. So the letter then goes on to say that even had there been a formal contract, it is their opinion he would have been fired for cause. I mean, this is hilarious that they fired him. Nobody stipulated to him that, yeah, you're done, I'm not going to pay you another dime. They had to ask whether it was, what the status was when the money stopped coming in, and Ohio State sent them the letter that said, well, first of all, you didn't have a contract, so in lieu of a contract, you're gone. And secondly, even if you did have a contract, we ain't paying you another dime. You would have violated the contract had you had one. So, yeah, it was. I'm going to do a story on it. I know Some other people have already written about it, but I think there's a unique perspective to it that, it's like they didn't just put him in jail, they put him under the jail. So, it was just, I'm sorry I'm laughing about this, but, when the attorney has to send him a letter to say, what happened? Where's our money? And they have
it's not coming. The saga rolls on. Days of our Buckeyes, like sands through the hourglass. All right, last thing. This blew up over the weekend.
About that. I don't know why, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, because if you don't laugh, you're going to cry.
You just have to cry, yeah.
So, okay, final thing. This blew up over the weekend. The Athletic, Ari Wasserman, reported he had one source that said that Ryan Day is in discussions to be Ohio State's head coach in waiting. It was kind of shot down by Gene Smith yesterday. He didn't say it was a false report. He just said he thinks Ryan Day's done a great job. This is me paraphrasing. He thinks Ryan Day's done a great job. He hopes he's one of Ohio State's offensive coordinators for a long time. But he also thinks Urban Meyer is going to be Ohio State's head coach for a long time. So kind of shot down, although he didn't say it was a false report. What do you make of that whole situation, Steve?
Well, first of all, there's no real advantage to making somebody the head coach in waiting because in 2010, as I did some research, they enacted legislation from the NCAA. They didn't like the Muschamps and the Jimbo Fishers. Other schools didn't like it that now you have these rock star assistant coaches who are the guy who's going to follow the legend, at those schools. I think it was Mac Brown at Texas and Bobby Bowden at Florida State. And they didn't like the schools recruiting against them did not like the idea that now you've got this rock star assistant coach who can go out on the road every week with the gravitas of being the head coach, basically. So they put in place restrictions that said that person can only do one in-home visit, just like the head coaches, Bobby Bowden and Mac Brown in those cases, would have been allowed to do as the head coach. You can only go see a prospect one time in their home, whereas as the assistant during the open weekends, or whatever, the calendar on the recruiting when they can go on the road, there's no restriction for those assistants. So they put that rule in. So you can't formally name somebody the head coach in waiting unless you want to abide by those restrictions. The other thing is Will Muschamp was made the Texas head coach in waiting, but when Florida came with this huge offer, he was like, G'day, I'm out the door for Gainesville, and Texas still hasn't recovered from the transition out of Mac Brown to whoever followed him, and now finally Tom Herman's starting to win some meaningful games for them. But it's been a long time coming. So I don't know. I think if Ryan Day is made, even behind the scenes, without announcing it, that's fine. But I don't think it comes with any kind of special provisions that if, who would be a school that would want him that is going to pay $3 or $4 million? I'm stretching for a example. I don't know that Louisville or whoever it could be that's kind of struggling this year, with a coach who's been there, Auburn perhaps, if they go down the dumper here, they've already lost to LSU. So I don't know. There's probably a school out there that would pony up $3 or $4 million a year to get this guy. He's got the look and the feel of somebody who's going to be a star in this profession for the next 2 decades. So I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. But you're right. Gene Smith didn't deny it. He just, kind of said, I think Urban's going to be here a while longer. So, which they have to say that. They'll get killed in recruiting if they don't. So, that's kind of where they're at on that right now. And I think that'll be, that's now fair play to ask Urban Meyer about today. Are you aware of these talks? Where do you stand? Are you going to be here for the full 5 years that you currently have on your contract through 2022? That's a big question I think he needs to answer.
It's going to be fun over there, and if we're not careful, we're not going to make it over there. This is, even for our standards,
We're going to need an arc to get over there today. Looks like.
Even for our long-winded standards here on the very improperly named Bucknuts Morning 5, we're taking it to the next level here with the length of this show. But let's end it now. Steve Helwagen, thank you very much for your wisdom, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning in to the show. I appreciate it. Again, keep it locked to Bucknuts. We're going to have a ton of news today. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.